Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a deep dive into a topic that's often avoided, but it can cost your heirs a lot of money and headache if it's messed up. Inherited traditional retirement accounts when you're a non-spouse beneficiary. Imagine this, your parent passes away and leaves you with a traditional 401k or traditional IRA, but you don't know how or when you have to take distributions. You don't want to trigger penalties, but you also don't want to leave the money unclaimed or taxed poorly. The goal here is to make sure we fully understand the rules. So let's walk through the up-to-date rules for non-spouse beneficiaries of traditional IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, and 457bs. You'll finish the video knowing exactly what to do, no gray areas, no guesswork. Before we dive into the rules, let's be clear on why this is such a minefield. If you get inherited RMDs wrong, the IRS can slam you with penalties, and we're talking big ones. And on top of that, the law just changed. The final regulations came out in 2024 and took effect this year in 2025. So if you're following old advice, it could flat out steer you in the wrong direction. And here's the kicker, not all beneficiaries are treated the same. You have standard beneficiaries, you have eligible beneficiaries, and then you have estates and trusts, and each one comes with its own rule book. And if you mix it up, you can create a real tax mess real quick. The bottom line is your strategy as a beneficiary can make or break how much you and your family actually get to keep. That's why we're going to break it down step by step. All right, first things first, which rule path applies to you? This is the key because everything else flows from here. There are three things you need to figure out. Number one, was the original account owner already past their required beginning date, or RBD? The RBD is the deadline by which you must take your first required minimum distribution from a traditional IRA or certain workplace-sponsored plans. For IRAs, right now that's April 1st of the year after the owner turns 73. For workplace plans like the 401k, 403b, or 457b, there's a special still working exception. That means even if someone is older than 73, they may not have yet hit their RBD if they're still employed and the plan allows for it, unless they own 5% or more of the company. Number two, are you a designated beneficiary, a living person who inherits the account, or a non-designated beneficiary like an estate, a charity, or a trust that doesn't qualify as a see-through trust? The rules are very different depending on which category you fall into. And number three, if you are a designated beneficiary, are you what's called an eligible designated beneficiary or an EDB? The non-spouse EDB categories are very specific. Someone who is disabled, someone who is chronically ill, the decedent's minor child, but only until they turn 21, or someone who is not more than 10 years younger than the decedent. If you're in one of those categories, you typically qualify for the more generous life expectancy payouts, and you aren't confined to the 10-year or hybrid rules. Once you work through those questions, you'll know exactly what bucket you fall into. From there, you can decide if you fall into case A or case B. Did the person die before their required beginning date or after, and walk through the options from there. Let's start with case A. The original account owner died before their required beginning date. In other words, they hadn't started taking RMDs yet during their lifetime. If you're a non-spouse, non-eligible designated beneficiary who inherits a traditional account, which is most adult children who inherit these traditional accounts, you're going to fall under the 10-year rule. That means there are no annual RMDs required in years 1 through 9. The only requirement is that the account has to be fully emptied by December 31st on the 10th year after the year of death. A quick example, let's say your parent passes away in 2025. Under the 10-year rule, you don't have to take out a single dollar 2026 through 2034 if you don't want to. Of course, you certainly can. You can take as much or as little out in those years as you want. There's just no required minimum amount. The only hard rule is that by December 31st of 2035, the account has to be completely emptied. Now, if you're a non-spouse eligible designated beneficiary, somebody who's chronically ill or disabled or one of the categories we talked about earlier, you don't have to follow the 10-year rule. Instead, you get to take annual RMDs based on your own life expectancy, which means you can stretch those withdrawals out over the course of your entire life. This makes an inherited account far more favorable in these situations because the money can continue growing tax deferred throughout your lifetime while you take smaller required withdrawals along the way. This is exactly what people used to call a stretch IRA. Before 2020, a lot of non-spouse heirs had access to this option, but after the passage of the Secure Act, this was eliminated for most beneficiaries. So today, unless you're an eligible designated beneficiary, this option is not available to you and you generally fall under the 10-year rule. There is a special wrinkle if the eligible designated beneficiary is the decedent's minor child. In that case, the child can use life expectancy payouts until they reach the age 21. But once they turn 21, the clock changes. At that point, a new 10-year countdown starts and the account has to be fully emptied by the end of that 10th year. One more important detail here, because in this situation, the account owner who passed away had not yet started taking RMDs, there is no year of death RMD that you have to worry about since they had not yet started taking RMDs. This is a non-issue for beneficiaries. That's case A, and that's pretty straightforward compared to what's coming next in case B, which is when the account owner passes away after already starting taking their RMDs. But before we dive into that, let's do an example for case A. Suppose your mom passes away in 2025 at the age of 70. Because she hadn't yet reached her required beginning date, she wasn't required to take RMDs during her lifetime. You inherit her IRA as a non-spouse, non-eligible beneficiary. That means you're under the 10-year rule. From 2026 through 2034, you are not required to take out a single dollar, though you can if you want or need the money. The only hard requirement is that by December 31st of 2035, the account must be completely emptied. But here's the caution. Let's say she left you with a $300,000 traditional IRA and that you decide not to touch it for the first 9 years. If it grows at 8% per year, by the time you reach year 10, that balance could easily be over $700,000. And remember, every dollar you withdraw from a traditional account is taxed as ordinary income. That means in year 10, you'd be staring at a $700,000 taxable distribution that would layer right on top of your take-home pay and any other income sources you have. This could bring along with it a very large tax bill. For most people, a smarter strategy is to take some distributions gradually, spreading them across the entire 10-year window. That way you can smooth out this income, you can manage your tax brackets, and you don't get hit with one massive tax bill in year 10. Okay, now we're going to get into the heavier lifting. Case B. This is when the original account owner had already started taking RMDs. In other words, they died on or after their required beginning date. If you are a non-spouse, non-eligible designated beneficiary, you have two rules that you have to follow at the same time. Number 1, you must keep taking annual RMDs in years 1 through 9. This is often called the at least as rapidly rule. And number 2, you also have to fully empty the account by December 31st of the 10th year after the year of death. The 10-year rule still applies on top of those annual RMDs. Now for those annual distributions. Here's how we would calculate them. First, you would figure out who had the longer life expectancy, the remaining of the decedent's own life expectancy or your own, and you would use the greater of the two. You always use the longer life expectancy. That ensures you don't under-distribute and risk penalties. For example, let's say your father passes away at the age of 80, and his remaining life expectancy, according to the IRS table, was 10 years. Let's say you're 50 years old, and your own life expectancy under IRS tables is 34 years. In that case, you would use your life expectancy of 34 years to calculate the divisor, because your number is greater. That ultimately allows you to take smaller withdrawals while still satisfying the IRS rules. If you're a non-spouse but eligible designated beneficiary, you get to follow different rules. You get to follow your life expectancy when it comes to these withdrawals, but you're not forced into that 10-year rule where you have to empty the full account by year 10. But here's the important catch. Once you pass away, that stretch use of the IRA ends, and your successor beneficiary does not follow those same rules. They're back on the clock, and this account must be emptied by year 10 once they inherit it. And just to be clear, that rule does apply in both scenarios when the original account owner dies and was not yet taking RMDs, or if they had passed away and were taking RMDs. It's really only the eligible designated beneficiary who is allowed to stretch this IRA out over the course of their entire lifetime. Once they pass away and they pass on this account to another beneficiary, they don't get those same stretch rules. And in case B here, we do have to focus on the year of death RMD. If the owner of the account died before taking their RMD, you as the beneficiary are responsible for making sure that RMD gets taken. Make sure the RMD is taken by then, otherwise you face a steep penalty, 25% of the RMD amount if not taken in time, but that penalty does drop to 10% if you correct it within a timely manner. However, just making sure to take this RMD in the time it should be taken means you avoid penalties altogether, and that's really the best case scenario. Let's walk through an example for case B. Suppose your father passes away in 2025 at the age of 80. Because he was already past his required beginning date, he had already started taking RMDs. You inherit his $500,000 traditional IRA as a non-spouse, non-eligible beneficiary. That means two rules apply at the same time. You must continue taking annual RMDs in years 1 through 9, and 2, you must fully empty the account by December 31st of 2035, which is the end of the 10th year after his death. Here's how that math might look. His remaining life expectancy was 10 years. Let's say your remaining life expectancy is 30 years. So you get to use your remaining life expectancy when you go to look at these IRS tables because your life expectancy is the longer of the two. This ultimately does reduce the amount that you would have to withdraw as an RMD, but keep in mind the entire account must be emptied by year 10. So the inherited traditional IRA is $500,000. Your 51, your life expectancy factor from the IRS table is 35.3. Divide $500,000 by 35.3. Your required minimum distribution works out to be just over $14,000. But keep in mind, if you're only taking out this minimum amount each year, the account is likely still growing and compounding in the background. Fast forward to year 10, and that balance could easily be much higher than $500,000. And at that point, the IRS rule still applies. Whatever is left has to be distributed in full. Every dollar comes out as a taxable income to you as the beneficiary. And remember, if your dad had not yet taken his RMD for 2025 and he passes away in 2025, you as the beneficiary are responsible for making sure that gets taken to avoid any penalties. But that is entirely separate from your RMD as a beneficiary. The RMDs for beneficiaries don't start until the following year, 2026. We also need to talk about one more bucket of heirs, non-designated beneficiaries. This is when the beneficiary isn't an actual person, but instead an estate, a charity, or a trust that doesn't meet the IRS definition of a see-through trust. The rules here are much less flexible. If the account owner died before their required beginning date, you're under the 5-year rule. The account has to be completely emptied by the end of the 5th year after death. There's no RMDs in the meantime. You just have to make sure that that balance is 0 at year 5. If the account owner died on or after their required beginning date, distributions continue, but they're based on the decedent's remaining life expectancy. This is often called the ghost life rule because we're using the original account owner's life expectancy as if they were still alive, and you continue taking these distributions until the account is fully emptied. These rules are rarely favorable from a tax perspective because they generally accelerate how quickly this money comes out and they reduce the amount that gets tax deferred. And this is exactly what happens if you name a non-qualified trust. one that the IRS doesn't recognize as a see-through trust. In that case, you're generally stuck with either the 5-year rule or the ghost life expectancy rule, which generally accelerates your payout and accelerates your taxes. And here's something important that a lot of people miss. The same thing can happen if you don't list any beneficiaries at all. In that case, the account defaults to your estate, and it gets treated under these same non-designated rules. That means your heirs can be forced into this 5-year payout or this ghost life expectancy, and on top of that, they likely have to go through probate. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all trusts are treated the same. With the right kind of see-through trust, like a properly drafted conduit trust or certain accumulation trusts, the IRS looks through those trusts to the actual individuals who are the beneficiaries. And this would allow those accounts to qualify for the more favorable 10-year rule or life expectancy payouts for eligible designated beneficiaries. So it's not that you can't ever use a trust, it's that you want to use the right kind of trust drafted in the right way. Before we wrap up, let's go over some of the critical deadlines and mechanics you absolutely do not want to get wrong. These are the kind of details where maybe you want to hit pause and replay. That's totally fine. This video is always going to be here for you. Number 1, the 10-year deadline. For most non-eligible designated beneficiaries, the account must be emptied by December 31st, the 10th year after death. For a minor child who qualifies as an eligible designated beneficiary, that 10-year clock starts ticking once they turn 21. Number 2, the annual RMD divisor, if you're required to take annual RMDs. You use the single life table from the IRS publication 590-B. In subsequent years, you don't go back and check the table for a new divisor. Instead, you take your original divisor and subtract 1. Here's what that would look like. Let's say you're 45 and your divisor is 41. In 2026, your RMD divisor is 41. In 2027, it's 40. In 2028, it's 39, and so on. And if you're in case B, as we talked about in this situation where the original account owner passed away but was already taking RMDs, you get to use the greater of the 2 life expectancies. So if you have a longer life expectancy than the decedent would have otherwise had, you get to use that when determining your continuing RMD. This ensures that you never under-distribute. Number 3, beneficiary determination date. September 30th of the year after death is the official cutoff for determining who qualifies as a designated beneficiary. If multiple beneficiaries inherit and no separate accounts are set up, you're often defaulted in following the oldest beneficiary when determining RMDs. So number 4, separate accounts by year end. To avoid that problem, you want to establish separate inherited accounts by December 31st of the year after death. That way, each beneficiary can use their own life expectancy and their own distribution rather than being forced into a less than favorable distribution. And number 5, penalty relief and missed RMDs. Today, the excise tax for missed RMDs is 25% of the amount you should have withdrawn. If you correct that mistake within 2 years, that penalty drops to 10%. And one other critical point that ties all of this together is that these are tax-deferred accounts. This entire video is about tax-deferred accounts. So every dollar you take out of one of these accounts is subject to taxes at ordinary income rates. So any withdrawals you receive will layer right on top of any other income sources you have throughout the year, and larger withdrawals can easily push you into higher tax brackets and hit you with a much larger tax bill than you're expecting. And this is really why inheriting these accounts in your peak earning years causes so many people concern. And that's why understanding the mechanics and planning your distributions carefully isn't just about avoiding penalties. It's about managing your taxable income and making sure you don't create a much bigger tax problem for yourself. And here's what you really need to do, not just what you need to know. Number 1, identify your category immediately. Are you a non-eligible designated beneficiary or an eligible designated beneficiary or a non-designated beneficiary like a charity or a trust? The category you fall into matters because it dictates the rules. Number 2, set up separate inherited accounts by December 31st of the year after death if there are multiple heirs. That way you're not stuck sharing the life expectancy of the oldest beneficiary, which would drive up your RMDs and generally make them less favorable. In case B scenarios, make sure you're meticulous. Determine who had the longer life expectancy, you or the individual who passed away. You get to use the RMD factor for the individual who had the longer life expectancy, and this is often where most mistakes are made. Number 4, don't forget the year of death RMD. If the original account owner was RMD age but had not yet taken their RMD in the year they passed away, you as the beneficiary have to make sure that it gets taken. And last but not least, maybe this is an area where you work with a trusted advisor. There's a lot of rules when it comes to inheriting these types of accounts, and a single misstep can cause penalties or taxes that were completely unnecessary. So it doesn't hurt to have someone who's done this before check your math as you go. And that friendly reminder, with these tax-deferred accounts, all withdrawals come out and are taxed as ordinary income, and that will stack right on top of any other income you have for the year. So if you're in your peak earning years, this is worth paying attention to because it likely will affect your tax bracket. The bottom line is you want to manage these withdrawals in a way that protects your taxes today, but also protects the overall inheritance that you were given. So what are your thoughts? Have you been in this situation? Could you share what your experience has been? Leave your comments down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. If my watch goes, oh my freaking gosh, this watch is not going, it will not stop. It's been nonstop at work today. And I'm just taking my watch off because I literally probably got 40 or 50 alerts while filming the last video. I can't take it. My watch is just nonstop going off. You have standard beneficiaries, not a word, beneficiaries. Majority. Whew, my tongue, so tired. I'm so hungry. 11:59, I was gonna take a break at noon, but here we are, chugging along. What the heck? Like, I have a hair in my eyebrow, like coming from my head, but it's like tickling and it's annoying. Oh my goodness. Whew. It's 1 o'clock. I started filming at 9 a.m. That was a long day.